Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today is Dr. Thomas Schwartz, a history and political science professor at Vanderbilt University. We're talking about the latest situation going on in the war between Russia and Ukraine. Dr. Schwartz, there's the latest public poll that came out of Russia. It shows that Vladimir Putin's popularity number is up to 83%. That's 12 points higher than it was the last time one of these polls was released in Russia before the invasion. Can we trust those numbers? Is that really right? I mean, this is an authoritarian country. They don't like a lot of dissent.
That's true, but it does seem to be the case that, and this is paralleled with Crimea, although that was a different circumstance, that Putin's ability to sort of make a rally around the flag, Russia besieged, Russia attacked, this seems to work, that it seems to play to a certain Russian view that the West is against us, the West is trying to shut us down with economic sanctions, and in a way, even though the popularity boost might be temporary, it still is an indication of the strong nationalism of the Russian people and their tendency to see the West particularly as attacking their very existence.
President Biden says that President Putin is self-isolating himself. Mm-hmm. I hope that's not from the hotline, but and also President Biden said he also thought that some of Putin's top aides have now been banished into like house arrest. How difficult is that going to be? That sounds like a kind of unstable situation in there right now.
It does. It's very hard. I mean, even if our intelligence on this, and we have been, the administration has been very open about sort of releasing intelligence that they have, I would think this is not necessarily at the same level of reliability than some of the more photographic or technical intelligence we've had. This might be based on sources that might not have a full knowledge of what's going on. So I think we have to be careful about thinking that there's a lot of turmoil there. What
about the oligarchs? They're the ones who've been very close to Putin. There have been a couple who've spoken out and seem to say, well, maybe Putin screwed up. Maybe he needs to, this could be the end of him. They don't say when or how, but is that a problem? Does he have an internal problem, or this 83% recognize that they, along with the rest of the Russians, have rallied behind him?
I think we have to be very careful about assuming he has an internal problem. There's no doubt that there are Russians who oppose the invasion and who have protested in the early part, but I think we would be engaging in a type of wishful thinking to think that he either could be deposed, or that there would be a palace coup, or that there is that sort of significant distrust or a significant unrest that could actually change the situation. I think the history sort of shows us, and as well as what we can see of some Russian popular sentiments, that there is this tendency to rally to the strong leader.
There is a feeling that perhaps Putin's not dealing with the entire situation. He's not being told the entire thing. But it's been going on for so long. Surely he knows he's not doing well. Why have the Russians been so ineffective with their forces in Ukraine?
Well, this is an argument and discussion that military leaders here in the United States and others have had. It does seem that the invasion was not properly prepared. It does seem that the planning for it was very inadequate. It seems that the invasion itself was based on a supposition that the Ukrainians would surrender quickly and that there would be relatively little resistance. In that sense, I think they were believing some of their own propaganda about the Ukraine and allowing that to, in a way, influence their views.
But there may be some substance to that. We just recently had the president of Ukraine come out and fire two of his top generals and say there are other traitors also in the country he hasn't had time to get to yet.
Right.
The traitors might be that they were the ones who might not have wanted to fight, would have perhaps quickly surrendered had they got the chance.
Yes. Yeah. No, there's no question. I think that there could have been within the Ukrainian leadership sources for this type of information going to Moscow, people who had dual loyalties. Again, remember, this in some ways, it's not exactly right, but in some ways this is closer to a civil war than a war between very different states. Ukraine has only been in existence for 30 years. There's a lot of intermarriage, connections of families, and so undoubtedly there were mixed loyalties, and that might have been played upon and led to an underestimation of the resistance that the Ukrainians would pose.
The Ukrainians have been so successful, at least to get to a stalemate to this point. They're now retaking some more territory around the capital. Are they going to be successful enough? Can they sustain that long enough to perhaps even think about being able to win this war?
Well, this is actually a question I think our own leaders have to decide, because the only way Ukraine will be successful or will sustain itself will be extensive foreign aid. And we have to, I think the West, the European Union, the United States has to make some of its own judgments here about whether to give more and more assistance to the Ukrainians that they seem to have justified.
We thought the sanctions we put on in terms of the ruble were going to be very effective, yet I understand the ruble on the foreign currency markets has rebounded about where it was before. So did we do something wrong? Did we not do enough on that? Do we need to do more?
I think what we have to recognize is that the sanctions involved Europe and the United States. A lot of other countries, particularly India and China, have not followed those sanctions. And in that sense, there's been ways out for Putin that have existed. The Europeans also have continued to buy Russian oil and gas. Their dependency is still there. So I think in many respects, we needed to acknowledge that the sanctions were not as tough as we thought they would be.
The more difficult times for the U.S. and its allies, particularly in NATO, you mentioned Germany. Germany's now warning of a potential gas shortages coming. They're also, President Biden's also now making the largest withdrawals ever out of our strategic reserve from oil, 1 million gallons a day for the next 6 months. That may or may not make much difference on the gas prices here, but the pain of this war for the U.S. and its allies, is it just beginning? Have we just not really tasted how bad this could possibly be?
I think so. I would actually point to something else as well, namely to the reliance of large parts of the Middle East and Africa on Ukrainian grain, and the possibility of food shortages, inflation, and other things hitting the Middle East and other vulnerable states that could lead to even more disorder.
Dr. Thomas Schwartz, our guest on Inside Politics. We're talking about the situation with the Russian war in Ukraine and what may happen next. Back to continue our conversation at the other side of this break.